Hey guys, welcome to another weekly market focus. And before we look at the opportunities we have for next week, I'm just going to walk you through the opportunities we had this week. So give me a second, let me pull that up real quick. Alright, so if you remember, I was holding the S&P trade for a very long time. So I think I held the S&P trade for like a week and 3 days, or a week and 2 days and something like that. But when I last gave the update on the S&P, I think we'd secured about 3.27% or maybe 4.36, one of those. So this is what we had right here. We had about 3.2% secured already, but I'm just going to show you. Eventually we moved our stop loss again to secure about 5.3% at this point, and we had the reversal that came in, and then it stopped us out at 5.3%. So at one point in time we was holding this trade at about 7.2%, but again I can only move my stop loss in terms of structure and everything, so we closed this at 5.3%. Now with BTC, this is the position I got in yesterday. So I was looking at sales on BTC yesterday. So we took the sales on BTC, we moved our stop loss to break even. Again, that's the most important thing, trade management. We moved our stop loss to break even, and then today price reversed and stopped me out at the break even point. But if you look at what BTC is doing right now, after stopping me out at break even, price is moving again to the downside. So I probably have to reanalyze this next week and see if, according to the risk to reward, if there's a possibility for me to take another position on BTC. Now let's look at the trades I didn't perform well on. The first one is NAS. I struggled on this one this week. So I had a buy opportunity on NAS right here, and it wasn't the best. So I took a buy position here, and I got stopped out on this real quick. I got stopped out, price moved a little bit, but it didn't move properly. So I got stopped out on this. And then let's look at US30. There's another one. So I was holding this position last week as well. So coming into this week, I held this buy positions on US30. And because I was looking at a very big move on US30, I'll show you what happened right here. So once price moved like this, I think that was about 1 or 2% already. I didn't close this trade, I didn't break even on anything because I needed structure again. So I break even in terms of the structure points that was being formed. So I didn't break even on this one, and then price came back to my entry point and eventually took me out on the stop loss on this one. So if you look at US30, once price hit my stop loss, it just moved again to the upside, just as the same thing was looking at. But that's fine. So the trade on the S&P, this covered all the losses we had on NAS, it covered the losses we had on US30 as well. So let's look at what we have for this week. And the first thing we have to look at again, the S&P, the DXY. So I'll start from the daily time frame real quick. So if you look at the daily time frame, so what we're looking at on the daily time frame, this is pretty easy right now, because last week this is the only thing we had this move coming to the downside, and we was trying to make a decision as to the possibility for price to probably move to the upside or move to the downside. But my primary bias from last week was to see prices test an area like this and kind of give you this false impression that price is moving to the upside, and then we see prices coming to the downside, and that played out perfectly. And that's why we had this buy positions on these other pairs playing out as well, and then eventually we had the reversal. So now looking at it from the daily time frame, we're using two simple concepts again. So the first concept again is just psychological numbers. So this week we've played from 105 and we're looking at 104. So price is probably headed to 104. So this is the one I'm looking at it. If price is headed to 104, what does it show? Like, what does it tell me? So I'm looking at the possibility for a trend, and I'm looking at the possibility for the side numbers right here. So if we get to 104, and then a decision has to be made as well. Does price want to move back to the upside to test 105, or is there a possibility for us to take prices to 103? So that's what I'm looking at from the daily time frame. And now for me to make sense of this, I need to step down to lower time frames. So let's do the 8-hour time frame real quick. Once you step down to lower time frames, you now see price action clearly, and you can tell price has been in the downtrend already, making lower lows and lower highs. That's it, quite easy, lower lows and lower highs. So right now, looking at price from the 8-hour time frame, I can already start making, say, anticipations for next week. So if this sales came in like this, very impulsive, it had a pullback, we've had another impulsive sell. So what I'm looking at is a possibility for price to go lower. And if price tells me it's not going lower than this point, so if there's an inability of price to go lower and even test, say, 104, then it means we might be having prices reversing again to the upside. Now, when you look at the daily time frame, for example, there should be like a trend that is building up right here. And so if there's an inability of a price to go past this point, then we could see the buyers coming back to test an area like this, and then eventually you see prices coming to the downside, or you have buyers test an area like this and you see price break, and then you see buyers taking prices to the upside. So it just depends on what is happening. But then having this in mind, like from the daily time frame, we're still in this downtrend, and you can see it clearly from the 8-hour time frame because price is making lower lows, lower highs. You can step down to the 4-hour time frame to see if it makes more sense, and let's just see if there's something else we can add on this. So on the 4-hour time frame again, let me make this, I'm gonna zoom out right here. On the 4-hour time frame, this is what I'm looking at, and this is a decision point for me because we're playing from 105 to 104, impulsive move from the sellers, there is a pullback, there's another massive move from the sellers. But at this point there's a question mark, because if we had these sells, and for every, so if price is moving to the downside and you have a pullback, price should eventually take out these other lows to make a new low and progressively like this. So I'm looking at this from the 4-hour time frame, and there's a question mark for me because if we had prices coming to the downside, we had a pullback, we had sellers attempting again, but then there is this difficulty for price to make an impulsive break to the downside. So looking at it from the 4-hour time frame with this difficulty for price to make this impulsive break to the downside, it's probably a sign that the buyers are probably going to step in, and then we see prices going to the upside. Now I might be wrong because the markets haven't closed. I think the market is going to close in a couple of minutes, like 40 minutes or something like that. Yeah, so it just depends, and price could still head to the downside. But looking at it as of now, there's this difficulty for sellers to take prices to the downside, and for me there's a high possibility because of this inability we could see prices moving to the upside. Now if these prices move to the upside, and then we're looking at the delivery to the daily time frame, which is a trend line from the daily time frame, so there is something like this on the daily time frame, and we could see prices pulling back up to an area like this for this potential move again to the downside. Now let's look at the hourly time frame just to put the icing on the cake. So looking at it from the hourly time frame, again, when you step down to lower time frames, you can see the details of what price is really trying to do. So you look at this right here, we're playing from 105, we're looking at 104, massive drop again, which is what we saw from the 4-hour time frame. And all we're trying to do is we're asking questions as to why there is that inability for price to make an impulsive break. So if you just zoom out again, so every time we had these pullbacks like here, we had this area taken out impulsively like this, you had a pullback right here, you had an impulsive break like this, and you had a pullback here, and you had an impulsive break to the downside. So that's what price has been doing. So now for me there's a question mark. Why is it difficult for price to go past this point impulsively compared to this move? It was an impulsive break, this break was impulsive, this break was impulsive as well. So why is this one finding it difficult? So that could tell us there's a possibility for buyers to step in and take prices to the upside to deliver to this daily trend line that is building up. So that's it for the DXY. So my anticipation for the DXY coming into next week, or my bias for the DXY coming into next week, is a possible move, say from 104, which is this area. We haven't really tapped 104, but I'm looking at this area and I'm looking at this possible move to the upside. So that's my bias on the DXY coming into next week. Now let's look at these other pairs, and because this bias might come in next week, we could see a lot of pullbacks or selling opportunities on other pairs. So the first one I'm looking at is US30. For you to understand what's happening on US30, you need to zoom out and probably go to higher time frames like the hourly time frames and stuff like that. So if you look at it from those time frames, you can tell price has been making higher highs and higher lows, and right now we have a higher high. And because the DXY has this potential to move to the upside to deliver to the daily time frame or the daily trend line, we could see a lot of pullbacks coming in on these pairs. So for example, US30, I'm going to put this right here. So we're looking at this on US30. We just went through 40,000 impulsively. So what I'm looking at is, say, a test of 40,000. If price or if the sellers come to 40,000 and they stop at this point and you see prices moving to the upside, we need to be patient because these pullbacks might come in again. So you might get an illusion that price is moving to the upside, but then eventually you see the pullback coming in. So price has made this higher high on a higher low, price has made a higher high, so we should expect a higher low as well for us to take prices again to the upside. Now when you look at US30, you need to look at it from, say, the daily time frame, 8 hours, 4 hours, for you to understand what's happening on the time frame like the hourly time frame, or for you to make a decision on the hourly time frame. So personally, I've done the research already, but you can look at it as well. There's a high possibility these pullbacks are going to come in. You might have price breaking below 40,000, probably get a test of 40,000, and then you see prices coming to the downside, and then you see the slow reaction from the sellers telling you this pullbacks is eventually coming to an end, and then you see prices moving again to the upside. So that's it for me on US30. I'm not really looking for buying opportunities on US30 as of now, simply because we just went through 40,000. I need to see a test of 40,000. If we test 40,000 and then we're staying above this area, all right, that makes it different, because now you can look at this trend here and try to play the buys from this area. But personally, I would really like to see, say, a deeper pullback before I make any attempts to buy the US30 again. Now let's look at NAS100. So with NAS100, we had, say, prices moving to the upside for the better part. So price moved to the upside, giving you higher highs, higher lows, and that was higher highs, higher lows, and eventually we had sellers coming in. So because sellers have stepped in impulsively like this, and because of what we're expecting on the DXY, this move right here for me is just a pullback from these sells, and we should eventually see prices coming lower to take out this area and probably test 20,000. So that's what I'm looking at on NAS100. So again, when you look at it from higher time frames, we went through 20,000, but when you look at it, say, from the 8-hour time frame, the 4 hours, and probably the daily time frame, this looks like an impulsive move, and so price is probably coming back to test 20,000, because on the hourly time frame you look at this like the test, but when you look at it from the 8-hour time frame, the daily time frame, price just went through this area, and we've not really tested 20,000 to see if price is staying above this zone for us to move again to the upside. And the only thing I can say it's happening right now on the hourly time frame on NAS100 is simply this impulsive move from the sellers, and we're having these pullbacks. So with these pullbacks coming in, and with what we're looking at on the DXY, this possibility of a price to move to the upside, I'm looking at I'm looking at NAS for a possible sell to come in. So, and that's why I say we'll have probably a lot of pullbacks. So even if these sales are coming in next week, I'm not going to trade these sales because that's not a setup for me, but we might just have these pullbacks coming in simply because price is trying to deliver on the daily time frame for the DXY. So that's my analysis on NAS. I'm not looking to take any position on NAS coming into next week. I need to see prices pulling back, probably have a test of 20,000, and then we'll make a decision at this point if we're looking for an opportunity to buy, to continue with the buys, or if price probably breaks to the downside, we might wait for a pullback and look for a possibility to sell. So it's just a lot that's probably going to happen, and these pullbacks are probably going to come in a lot. Let's look at the S&P real quick. The same thing is happening on the S&P, on the S&P 500. So for the better part as well, we had prices making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs and higher lows like this. And again, we had this impulsive move from the sellers. Now with the S&P, this is quite different because we had a test of 56,000, and you know, we use psychological numbers a lot, so I'm just going to zoom in right here. If you're getting confused with what's happening on the S&P, go look at it from the higher time frame. Say look at it from the daily time frame, look at it from the 8-hour time frame, the 4-hour time frame, before you step to the hourly time frame. So I've done this already, and that's why it's quite easy for me to step to time frames like the hourly time frame, and then I start making these decisions. So when you look at it from the hourly time frame, this is what's happening. Look at the DXY again. There's a possibility, or there's this inability for the DXY to make this move to the downside, and there is this possibility for it to go to the upside to test this trend line on the daily time frame. Now look at the S&P 500. You have a massive move to the upside. Sellers came through, tested 5600. That's fine. You had a pullback that came in, inability for these pullbacks to really break to the upside. So every time we had a pullback, we had these impulsive breaks, pullback, impulsive break, pullback, impulsive break. So look at this moves to the upside. Price was taking out these highs perfectly. But when you look at this one right here, there was this inability. So yeah, you can say price wicked this area out, but it's very shallow compared to what has been happening previously. So there's an inability for price to go to the upside. So we could see prices testing 5600. Now the S&P 500, I think this is something I'll really pay attention to next week, because if we have price testing 5600 again, now this is testing 5600 from the 4-hour time frame, the 8-hour time frame, and most likely the daily time frame. So we could see prices testing 5600 and probably just a little push to the downside, and then eventually price trying to resume again the move to the upside. So if the DXY moves to the upside and we have a test of this trend line right here before seeing prices step into the downside, we could see the S&P dropping as well to an area like this psychological number of 56,000, and then holding at this point, and then eventually we see prices moving to the upside. If this fails, then we could see the S&P tanking as well. So we could see this move going to the downside. So probably say from 5600, and the next area we could be testing is 5500. But I'm not really buying this sells coming to the downside. I'm really inclined to the buys, but all we're just waiting for is this pullback to come in. So that's my take on the S&P. I'm waiting for the pullbacks to come in on the S&P. So we'll look again for another possibility to take buys. So I'm looking at 5600 as a possible area where prices could get to. Now let's look at one more pair, and that is gold. All right, so this one, gold is always very tricky, always very tricky. So when you look at it, I'm gonna zoom out as well. So what has price been doing? So price has been making highs, has been giving us lows, highs and lows, higher high and a higher low. We've had a higher high right here. We tested 2400. We had a test of 2400, and then we had buyers coming in. Again, there was that inability for prices to go to the upside. Now looking at what's been happening, every time we had these highs taken out, we had a pullback, highs, pullback. We made new highs, we had a pullback. So we've made these highs as well, we've had this pullback, Now you could consider this as the move to go to the upside, but then we had this inability. So when I'm looking at this on gold, I'm looking at the possibility for prices to come back and test 2400, and then a decision is probably going to be made at this point. So first of all, we're having this inability already to take prices to the upside. Look at the DXY, prices moving to the downside, inability, possibility for prices to move to the upside. You look at gold, prices moving to the upside, there is a pullback, there's an inability, possibility for prices to move to the downside. So I'm going to clean this real quick and then we'll do one little explanation again on gold. So now you've had this perspective, you've had this understanding. So what we're looking at on gold right now, so I'm looking at a possible pullback to come in again on gold. And if we have these pullbacks coming in on gold, what areas am I looking at? So I'm looking at an area like this. I'm looking at 2400. First of all, I'm looking at this psychological number right here. Another thing you can add just to help you visualize what is happening on gold is probably this trend line. So you can do something like this. So we can use a trend line right here. So now this trend line is coming in from the hourly time frame. So it's probably just going to help you temporarily just to deliver, or to help price deliver to what's happening on, say, the daily time frame. So if you have prices trying to attempt, say, 2400, we could see prices testing this trend line as well. And at this point, a decision is going to be made. So if price still wants to go to the upside, we could take off from a combination of this psychological number and this trend line, and then we see prices moving to the upside, or we see prices moving to, I'm gonna do this, or we see prices moving to this area, and if there's that inability to go to the upside, then you see gold moving to the downside. Once this happens, we'll probably wait for pullbacks, and then we try to join with this sales. So that's what I'm looking at on all of these pairs. And just a quick recap on the DXY as well, I'm still expecting prices to move to the upside because there's that inability for price to make lows. On US30, I'm expecting pullbacks to come in, probably very deep pullbacks. NAS100, I'm expecting the pullbacks to come in as well. On the S&P500, I'm expecting pullbacks to come in as well. And on gold, I'm expecting pullbacks. So all we're expecting, I think majority of the pairs is just showing us there's this possibility for us to have pullbacks. So if that's what we're looking at, and then I'll wait and see what happens. In a situation like this, it's quite difficult for me to take positions. So what I'm most likely going to do is wait for these pullbacks to come in, and once these pullbacks come in, and then I'll make a decision, because sometimes the pullbacks might come in and then it offsets the structure we're looking at. So that's it for this week, guys, and if you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. See you during the next one. Bye for now.